As long as we're talking about long-term contracts.
Yeah, was that a segue? That's called a segue.
That's
I
called
think.
the segue. That's called the segue. I learned that when I was at Root.
Mhm.
Nolan Arenado. I
Yep.
mean, obviously, it's on everybody's mind, including, I'm
Sure.
sure, yours. I mean, how do you look at the Arenado situation, and what does the fact that you didn't settle before arbitration doesn't necessarily mean anything? How do you work this thing, and at what point do you feel like there's a now or never?
Yeah, I mean, in relation to the arbitration thing, it really doesn't, it doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, it's partly a function of when we started, the whole process and when arbitration happens to be. And so, as I've said before, we've been communicating with Nolan on this for a while, and there hasn't really been a need or a want for any sort of deadline to this point. I don't think that really. I don't think it helps anything right now. I don't think it's reflective of the relationship that that we've had with him. Because we haven't really needed deadlines or some sort of ultimatums prior, in any sort of negotiation or any sort of situation with Nolan in the many years that he's been in the organization. So why now? And sure, there might be more on the line now in terms of his future, in terms of future dollars, than maybe there's ever been in the past. But I think we're going to work hard to. We're just going to work hard to keep things moving along, and at some point, as negotiations always do, you either find a point where you're equally happy or equally unhappy, and that's when things either get done or they don't. But things are fine, and we'll keep things under wraps and kind of under hat for now, and just keep kind of plugging away, see what happens.
I mean, given the idea you guys are coming off back-to-back years of going to the postseason, with your young pitching, I'm sure you feel good about what's ahead this year.
Yeah.
So I would assume there's not a feeling like, well, if we don't have something done by opening day, we got to do something.
No, I think every player has his own ideas as to what makes sense for him. For Charlie, now that it's done, we can talk about it. For Charlie, he had no interest in having that thing bleed into the season last year. And so I think we could talk about that openly and honestly, and we were able to, both sides were kind of able to hold up their end of the bargain on that, and find some common ground prior to the season being done or opening up. And, so, I'm not going to talk specifically what Nolan's thinking. I mean, he can talk about that if he wants, but, it is what it is, right? I mean, we've said that before too. I mean, this is the fact that we're here talking about this, the fact that we're here talking about Nolan being the type of player that he is, and the fact that we're talking about some sort of shared interest in extending this relationship for a long period of time. That's a really good thing, right? That means that we appreciate him. That means he's appreciated his time in the organization. It means he's become a hell of a player. And so, this is all a good thing. No matter how it ends up, this is a good thing for him. And it's a good thing for the organization. Obviously, we'd love to have him stick around, but we'll see what happens.
I mean, having been the farm director before you became the general manager, has that given you a little bit more insight, maybe a little more of a relationship with Nolan than some of the younger guys that might come through?
Maybe a little bit. Nolan was, Nolan based when I kind of was doing my thing as a farm director, he was, just kind of, I mean, we crossed over maybe for a year, it kind of in that intensive, maybe even a little less, my whatever impact or whatever relationship or whatever this or that kind of happened in our player development years, that some of the guys that have come after him, I've got a little bit more intensive time with those guys. Trevor Story, David Dahl, that kind of wave of our age of players. Nolan was just prior to those guys. But I think just being around and, we have so many people in the organization that have been around for so long. Billy Schmidt and our scouts, being able to be around them and understand what they saw in Nolan for all those years prior to us drafting him and why we took him, and having that institutional knowledge kind of still in the organization, that's a helpful thing, definitely.
Now, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask him,